Hello everyone, I'm Tara Jones from Pieceful Solutions, and I have with me my girl Loops, and we're going to show you how to transfer the groundwork exercise called raking and lateral cervical flexion to the point where you can use it while you're riding. This is a great exercise, very simple in technique, but the main thing that you're going to be using this exercise for is to help you as the rider learn to re-educate your hands every so often to keep you soft and pliable when working with your horse. It's very easy to fall into the trap when you're riding your horses to get a little bit defensive in your hands or to start using your hands in a manner that you don't need to add that much pressure. So this is one of the exercises I go to very often, even myself, to keep my hands what I call honest. So I'm going to hop on Loops here, we're going to go over this exercise, and I'm going to show you how raking can help increase your horse's lateral cervical flexion. Here we are, we're under saddle, and we're going to reiterate and go over how to rake the reins. Now remember, this exercise is meant to be very, very soft. I oftentimes remind my students to think of stroking the horse's mane very, very lightly. This exercise is meant to be worked on one rein at a time, and you can go back and forth from left to right. Remember, this exercise is to help increase the lateral cervical flexion. Cervical flexion is in the cervical vertebrae. So when you look at the horse from a side view, when I go to ask Loops to rake or to bend to the side by raking the rein, I want to make sure that her ears are in fact level. So if you're looking at her from a straight head position, when I have her facing the camera, I want to look at the tips of her ears and keep those level and even. If I were to pull her to the left, you can see that her right ear is slightly dipping lower than the left ear. This is what's going to create what's called head tilt, and head tilt is something we are definitely trying to stay away from. I don't want my horse's cervical vertebrae to twist. So what I want to reiterate to Loops is that when I rake the rein very, very lightly, and you can see her first instinct is to lower her head, I'm just going to keep raking extra, extra lightly on the reins, and she can stand here at a standstill. The second that she starts to bend to the left, I'm going to immediately go to the middle of the rein, or what I would call the buckle. Oftentimes in English riding, the English reins have a buckle in the center. So I refer to reins as going to the buckle, and that means going to the center. I'm going to go ahead and ask Loops to bend to the right. So I'm going to start with my right hand, and I'm just going to very gradually and lightly rake the rein towards my belly button. The second that Loops responds by bending a little bit to the right, I'm going to immediately release her, make sure my reins are even in the center on the buckle, and then I'm going to repeat this exercise on the left. This is very, very, very easy to start pulling with this exercise. And one of the things I go over with my students is be very honest in the way that you're asking your horse. Some horses I've sat on, it has taken me over 20 minutes to get them to bend one direction or the other without pulling. And what that tends to tell me about that horse is that horse will wait for that pulling pressure in order to respond to it. One of the things that's really important when you're working with your horses is to make sure that they understand what a light, conservative, polite pressure is. In fact, a lot of our horses are missing that pressure, because as we graduate up the scale, and as we start to reiterate, and as we start to increase our horse's potential, and we start to make them more athletic, we as the rider forget to go back to that lightest possible pressure. So as I'm working back and forth, you can see how I'm just feeding the rein left, very good, come back to center, and then to the right. One of the most important parts to remember when you're asking your horse to bend, right, center, left, center, right, center, left, center, is indeed the center. Because this is where all of the vertebrae line up. This is where our horse tends to be the most stiff, and this is where it tends to be the hardest to get our horse to bend that little bit of 4-inch bend like she has here. Now oftentimes what I'll start by telling my students is when your horse laterally flexes like she's doing, here she's stuck. She's in what I always call a stalemate, where I don't feel any reaction. I almost feel a deadened jaw. I don't feel any activity in it, and I'm just going to keep raking. Now, if she would completely ignore me, I'm glad she's doing this. I'm going to reach down further. I'm not going to pull harder. I'm just going to increase my reach. As I increase that reach, Loops is going to eventually figure out that what I'm looking for is that lateral cervical flex to the right. And here you can see she's flexing, but she didn't give it to me voluntarily. So let's start by saying that I want a voluntary flex to the left. And from center, I want a voluntary flex to the right. So as you're working through this exercise with your horse, it's very, very important that you as the rider stay honest with your hands. It's oftentimes what I refer to as taking a hose, bringing it towards you, stroking the mane. It's very, very light. It's almost like two-finger pressure. Okay, I'm not actually squeezing into the rope. I'm just combing along the surface of it. You'll be surprised at how light your horse will actually get. But again, it starts with us. So when we're asking for this lateral cervical flexion, I'm going to get more and more picky about how my horse's head is coming to the right or to the left. Because again, I don't want her diving down like she just did. I do in fact want her bending, but I want her bending from the throat latch. And I want her bending with her nose out in front of vertical. I don't want her nose coming behind, or I don't want her bringing her chin towards her chest. Once your horse has this really good, then you can move on to actually getting their feet to move while you're asking for the raking. But what we're going to start with in this series is part 1, which is at the standstill, asking her to rake to the right and left. I'm going to provide the link below of the groundwork exercise we've done prior to this with Phantom, asking her for the lateral cervical flexion on the ground. So once you complete step 1 and step 2, you're ready to move on to the walk. I hope this has helped. I'm glad that you are all enjoying these video tutorials and all of these riding and training tips. I certainly love making them and love sharing my knowledge and all of the things that have worked with me over the years with all of my horses, and how many horses have taught me so many things. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to visit my website at tarajonestraining.com, or you can send me an email at tarajones7@yahoo.com. I'd be happy to hear from you. I hope you all have a great night. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.